I put so much work into this animal, no one is going to mess it up. And if they do, we're gonna have a problem. Welcome back. You can see some things are developing in the background, and we'll talk about that in the vlog next week. The long and short of it is basically that we're moving. Big surprise. So today I thought we could do a little story time. They're going to be focused on cases that had a profound impact on me or something that I dealt with that I had never dealt with before. Things that I think other people in the field can relate to, and especially things that I think don't get enough attention. You know, cases that are probably a little bit more difficult. Some of them are not going to have that great of outcomes. Some of them are going to have happy outcomes like this one. They'll also be not only medical cases, but different cases that dealt with different aspects of the sheltering system and the animal welfare system, especially with issues surrounding those. And some of them are going to be all of those in one. So there'll be medical issues coupled with sheltering issues and how we dealt with them, how we got through them, and what they ended up meaning going forward. So we're going to start with a story that's like fresh in my mind because it happened recently at the end of 2023. I wasn't there when Georgina came in. I don't know if she was surrendered as like an owner surrender or if she was a stray. But she was brought to an emergency clinic and was found to be positive for parvo. And so through some course of events that I don't know what the situation was, but she came into our parvo ward. She was really, really down and out. She just wanted to sleep all day. She was leaking bloody diarrhea to the point where there was like no controlling it. We used up so many potty pads trying to make sure she was comfortable, make sure she wasn't getting any scald from the stool. We were trying so many different things to help her get through it. She was on all of the anti-nausea meds. She was on the secondary antibiotic eventually, and she was just very, very sad. The clip I'm going to show here was actually, I think, day 3 or 4 of her being with us, and she doesn't really want to get up. She kind of not really struggles to get up, but it does take a lot of effort for her. Things that are unique about Georgina were that she was a Dalmatian, pretty much a purebred Dalmatian, which we don't see a lot of in shelters. So she was kind of a unicorn in that sense already. She is also an adult, I mean at least a year, maybe 2, which is also not normal for us in parvo. We don't get a lot of adults. I have had one as old as 7 in the parvo ward. It is rare, but it does happen because, even if she did have an owner, a lot of owners don't keep up on vaccines, and so she was lucky to get to that point without contracting parvo. So she was kind of a weird case already just because she was an adult purebred Dalmatian with parvo. Like I said, I wasn't there when she came in, but I heard that she was a little standoffish, a little bit difficult to like place her catheter and stuff. Obviously that could be just because she doesn't feel well, but also generally Dalmatians don't have the best temperament. She was just an adult that felt crappy, which is usually how the adults feel when they're in the parvo ward. They don't really want to be touched or handled, and they just want to be left alone. And so it gets a little bit difficult to treat them because they are a little bit more finicky like that. You just go slow and do the best you can to get them the medicine. And that's another great thing about our protocol, and the major protocol that's used pretty widely now is that antibiotic you're giving is a 1-dose injection that lasts 2 weeks, so you don't have to keep giving them antibiotics every single day for it to work, so that we can treat dogs that need a little bit more time or a little bit less handling. So if you remember my video about parvo, which if you haven't seen it, make sure to go watch it. I will link it somewhere in here. Parvo usually has a quick turnaround, so it takes about 2 weeks to incubate. So anytime within those 2 weeks, a dog could test positive for parvo. They will shed it for 2 weeks, but usually whenever you start treatment, they have about a week where the treatment is either going to work or it's not. When an animal comes into our parvo ward, we give them a minimum of 5 days in treatment, and then we will retest them to see where they are. So usually dogs at that 5-day mark will be eating, doing well, having formed stool, they will test negative and we will kick them out and move them through the system. Some dogs, like, they have that first poop after treatment and it's still positive because it is still shedding, but literally the next day or even that night, it will test negatives. It just kind of depends on the patient, what happens and how quickly they get through. But for the most part, there is like a pretty reliable schedule for most animals to, by the 5 to 7 day mark of treatment, they're going to be negative and they're going to be better. There have been a lot of cases recently that we've had where even on day 7, they are still crappy. They are still leaking diarrhea. They're not eating. They might be vomiting too. We have to come up with a plan and supplemental treatment for that at that point. For Georgina, that is exactly what happened. At day 7, she wasn't eating anything. She would maybe take the tiniest little bite of something and then not touch it again. She would also do this hard swallowing thing. So you'll see them go like that and they're swallowing. And that's usually a sign of nausea. So it's kind of like it's almost like a gag reflex where they feel like they're gonna be nauseous and they like do that. She was doing that and she would spit up a little bit too. So she would be like, and then not really anything come out, just be like maybe a little bit of spit, but not like full vomiting. Like, I don't even know if you call that regurgitation at that point because there was nothing to regurgitate. There was nothing in her system. At that point, we tried some other medication. We kept her on the regular anti-nausea meds, but we also tried a drug called famotidine, acid reducer. It helps with the gastric acidity and stuff like that to help soothe the stomach to maybe she would want to eat at that point if her stomach wasn't so acidic. So like if you think of you eating a really spicy meal and you wake up the next day and your stomach just feels like completely raw and you don't want to eat anything, similar to that. We still had her on fluids, but it was even more of a struggle because she did start feeling better. She would come up and seek attention and, want to cuddle and things like that. She looked really good. Her attitude and her energy was completely different, much better, but she just didn't want to eat and she was losing weight because she still isn't eating. And if we didn't have her hooked up to her fluids, she would lose even more weight because she was dehydrated. So it was a struggle to get the last catheter that we did in her because she felt so good and she didn't want to be held down and, poked. It was difficult because we had to figure out why she wasn't eating and what to do when we couldn't keep a catheter in her to keep her hydrated and, maintaining as much as possible. I was getting really nervous because she was so skinny and she just kept losing weight. You could see her hip bones and her ribs, her skin. When we test for dehydration, we usually will pull a bit of the skin up, and if it goes right back, they're fully hydrated. If it stays at all, that means they're severely dehydrated. And so that's what hers would do. And so I was really worried about her because we didn't know anything to do to help her because she had basically kicked the parvo at that point. It was just the after effects of that. So it's this really weird dichotomy of you look better, but you're not doing the normal things that you need to be doing to live. This weird situation that we run into 1 or 2 every couple rounds where they will just have a little bit of harder time and we don't know why. So we have to try and scramble and figure out what to do for them. We tried to give her everything to stimulate her appetite. We tried all the different kinds of dog food, dry and wet. We tried chicken, baby food, pumpkin. I don't know if we tried peanut butter, but I did yogurt, we did cheese, hot dogs, carrots and apples and, bread, everything. We were literally pulling things out of our lunch boxes to try and find something that would entice her to eat, that would maybe lead us down a path of okay, maybe if she just gets something in her system, she'll realize that she's hungry and she wants to eat more. And none of it was working. We ended up testing her stool, even though it was still loose. We tested her. She was negative for parvo, which means once they're negative for parvo, they can go out of the ward and get other testing. So they really don't allow us to do other testing like x-rays or ultrasounds or anything when they're positive because you run the risk of spreading parvo to that area of the clinic or to any other patients that might need those diagnostics. When she was negative, we were able to schedule a time for her to get x-rays. So we took initial x-rays when she was negative, just plain old abdominal x-rays, nothing crazy. Later that week, we did a barium study. Barium the term is radio opaque. So when you shoot the x-rays through barium, the barium will show up on the x-ray. Organs, you're gonna see gray masses. You're not gonna see any detail. So we use the barium to kind of track movement through the intestines and to also see where it might clump around something that might be causing a obstruction or might look weird on the lining of the intestines or something like that. So the barium will really stick to any abnormality in the esophagus and in the stomach and the intestines to kind of give you an idea of what might be going on. You use it to see things that you aren't able to see with regular radiographs. So the barium, you have to give a huge amount to make sure that it's going to show as much as possible as it moves through the GI system. So we gave her all of that. She got about half because she was being difficult. When you do a barium study, you're taking multiple x-rays on a timed schedule. And we would take one right after giving the barium, and then we would wait 15 minutes, take another one, wait 30 minutes from when we gave it, take another one, wait an hour, take another one. You're doing that to track like as it moves through the system to make sure it keeps moving and to see if it shows anything as it moves through. If you have an obstruction in the GI system, it's not going to keep moving in the way it should. Hers moved through just fine, of course. There was one part where it kind of showed more of the lining of the stomach, and me and the other person who was helping me were like, that seems weird, it doesn't look normal. I guess that is normal for barium, but I just haven't seen it before. And I kind of wonder if the parvo just, because it wipes out all the stuff on the lining of the intestine, if that just like absorbed it a little bit more than a normal stomach would. If you're a vet and you know about that, please let me know if that is a thing or not. Her barium study was normal. So basically the plan was to put her on a special diet. If you see my video on special diets, you will be familiar with this. And if you haven't, I will link that as well, and please feel free to watch it. Put her on an ID diet, which is basically a bland diet. Tried our best to entice her to eat that. Apparently, that's all she needed, because she did start eating the wet ID food, and she got to a point where she was starting to gain weight again. She was drinking water, and she was well enough to go to a foster home. While she was starting to eat and stuff like that, we kept her back in the parvo ward because we didn't have any other patients, because she needed a little bit more attention. That's not to say that she wouldn't get that out in general population. It was just difficult to let her go because she was still on the brink of like, she could just crash, like since she's not eating and she's not getting any kind of maintenance fluids or dextrose or anything like that to keep her blood sugar up. And because she was so skinny and still losing weight, it's really this balancing act that you want to make sure she stays okay and doesn't get forgotten or doesn't get, ignored or something like that. A lot of times in general population, there's so many animals that it gets hard to make sure everyone is eating. And when they're not eating for a certain amount, be on top of it so that something doesn't happen. So if they haven't been eating for 3 days, they don't just crash. We didn't want to let her go because that might happen, especially with her being post-parvo. She is a little more at risk because her immune system is already suppressed from the parvo. Even though she's fought through the parvo, her immune system is still suppressed, so that if we send her out into general population, not only is her appetite not 100% yet, but she is getting exposed to other things that other animals have. So like kennel cough, anything else that might be out there, like skin conditions and things like that. We have already put in, at this point, 2 weeks worth of really hard work on her. To let her go and have something happen out there undoes all that work or sets her back again. We just really didn't want to do that. So it was a little bit of a struggle with management. This is our patient that we've been working with for 2 weeks, which is a long time for us in this parvo ward. She had a interested party. She was slated for a fundraising event. Like, she was a really high profile dog, and we wanted to do our best to not let anything happen to her to set her back. And it was kind of a fight with management to let us keep taking care of her to make sure she was improving at a good rate. So that was a little bit of a struggle that comes up with management a lot in shelters. Management tends to look at numbers. If something tests negative, why are they still in there? And they don't really, in my perspective, they don't really look at this animal specifically and their specific needs. They're looking at numbers and movement and output and things like that. So when you have an animal that you're looking at and you know what they feel like and what they're at risk for, you have to fight for them and be an advocate for what is in their best interest. That was something we had to fight for and do our best to advocate for her, because we were so scared that she would regress in some way, get exposed to something else that would change her outcome, not for the better. She ended up eating the ID. She ended up going to a foster home with her interested party that wanted to adopt her, which was awesome. It ended up working out fine, but you do go through those moments where you're like, I put so much work into this animal, no one is going to mess it up. And if they do, we're gonna have a problem. He also is kind of a perfect case to showcase what happens with parvo patients and how much it depletes their system to where even if they should be on the normal treatment schedule, they aren't, and every patient is different, and you have to address those issues as they come up and be an advocate for your animal to say, can we try this treatment? What can we do? What is this patient going to respond to that someone else might not have? And so you do have those cases where it's almost the exact same symptoms, but the outcome is completely different. So after Georgina, we had a little stray Chihuahua mix that ended up having basically the same thing. She was still having diarrhea, although I think it had gotten better. She wasn't eating. She kept vomiting, spitting up. Even when she would eat, eventually, she would just regurgitate it. And we had no idea why. We tried almost everything that we did with Georgina. We x-rays on her. We tried ID. We tried other medications like the famotidine and stuff, and nothing was working. The same vet that had worked with us on Georgina worked with us on this Chihuahua, and she went out of her way to purchase omeprazole, which is basically Prilosec, because you can give that to animals with veterinary discretion. So definitely ask your vet before you do that. But we ended up trying that on her. It didn't work. Different from Georgina in that she was still losing weight and she wasn't keeping her hydration, but she was also really pale. So not only with her hydration, but she was still anemic. With parvo, you tend to lose a lot of blood through the diarrhea. And so her color, it always sucked. Her color was always pale. I don't think she was ever like pink and hydrated and healthy looking. She just never could get past those symptoms. Unfortunately, she started tanking. Even though she was kept on fluids for longer, she had a catheter for almost the whole time and nothing was helping. We ended up euthanizing her. We literally euthanized her, took her to the vet to do something called a necropsy, which is an autopsy, to see if there was anything that we could have missed that would explain what was going on with her. And the only thing that we found was her liver looked a little bit weird. So usually when you look at a liver, it's going to be really dark red. Even if you euthanize an animal, open them up right away, the liver should still look like that because it hasn't had enough time to see any changes. That was like maybe 10 minutes worth of time, and that's not really enough time for any changes to happen post-mortem. When we saw her liver, it was not as dark red and it had like yellow speckles in it. And so we don't really know what was going on with her. We had run blood work and it was mostly normal. So there was nothing in her blood work to suggest some other kind of illness. Even the vet who did the necropsy was like, I don't know why her liver would be like that. That was kind of a mystery that like we had tried everything that had worked before and she had the same symptoms as Georgina. Something else was going on that we had no way to know about. It was probably the best outcome for her. You know, she probably had some kind of weird thing going on outside of the parvo that the parvo just took advantage of, and exacerbated to the point where she couldn't recover. So we have both ends of the spectrum, with Georgina being able to recover and this Chihuahua not being able to. So we really did our best for both of these animals, and we did keep the Chihuahua in the parvo ward for longer to try and figure out what was going on and give her the most amount of attention and care that we could, because she was our patient. At the point when we euthanized her, she had been in there for 2 weeks, so she was, our baby, and we had put in so much work that we wanted to be the ones to see it to the end and not just pass her off to people she doesn't know, who don't know her history, who don't know how she is, and don't know what's normal and what's not. They're our patients, and we're gonna see it through as much as possible. The story of Georgina and the GI mystery, so we don't really know what was going on with Georgina. Since she recovered and was able to go on to live a normal life in a home, we assume that she just had a little bit harder time recovering from the parvo. It will probably always be a mystery. I am so happy that she recovered so well. She kind of became my baby in a way. I was there for her x-rays, and so she would always kind of like go look at other people and then run right back to me. So got those feelings of when an animal chooses you as their person. She was kind of like my baby while she was in there. That would have been really hard to let go of her, and it was the same with the Chihuahua. It was really hard to let go of her after putting in so much work and not being able to help them. It really enforced on me the importance of being an advocate for your patients, not letting management concerned with numbers and statistics push you around, and not letting them prioritize those things over this one individual patient, because that's not what this is all about. We're about helping animals, and if your support staff says this is what they think is best, then you should probably listen to them because they are the ones handling these animals, who know them the best, who know what they've been through and know what works for them and what doesn't, and medically or behaviorally or husbandry associated things. Again, like, I already knew that it was important to advocate for my patients, but it really enforced it to where, okay, I really need to step up and advocate for what I think is right and not let fear of management get in the way of that. I think this case also made me think of not everything is going to go according to plan for certain things. So the treatment plan, the SOP, and what should happen. But when that doesn't happen, knowing what next steps to take and what might have worked in the past and what things you can do to help on your end. So things you can offer to encourage appetite, ways you can help supplement their hydration, keeping up their mental state as well. So this case really kind of impressed all of that onto me in a way that I hadn't been able to see it before. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. If you want to share your own experiences about caring for animals with mysterious issues and how you guys got through it, how you advocated for your patients against what was being told to you by management, I'd love to hear that as well. Anything like that, please leave down in the comments below. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.